Welcome to installment number 285 of the Mitzvahs as enumerated by Maimonides, the Rambam. Today we are starting a new conversation regarding a Jewish slave. And we have a few mitzvahs in this vein. We start off with positive commandment number 232, which is the general law of a Jewish slave. And as you might know, it is actually really discouraged, or I don't want to use the word prohibited because that's a bit of a strong word, because in the end of the day, if somebody does choose to sell themselves as a slave, we do consider it as a valid sale. But really, a Jew is not meant to sell himself as a slave. This can only happen under two circumstances. One is if, because of a theft, if somebody stole something and he did not have the means to repay it, and he is working simply towards repaying his theft. This is one way that the Jewish court can help him repay his debt. And secondly is if a person is so incredibly impoverished that he literally doesn't even have money to buy food or clothing, then, it really has to be very, very serious in order for him to sell himself as a slave. And as I said, it's really not something that is encouraged at all. It is something that is really, discouraged in a big way. And again, I don't want to say prohibited, because in the end of the day, it is something that is recognized, but it's really something that shouldn't be done. However, in the case that a person is so desperate that he so chooses to sell himself as a slave, there are some very, very particular laws that guideline how they must be treated. So firstly, we have negative commandment 257, which is the prohibition to give them humiliating work. They must be treated with dignity. And an example here is given of having them carry your clothing to the bathhouse, or schlepping a mat for you that, means that they'd be walking with you for very long distances just so you can have your mat for when you need to rest. This type of work is humiliating and is not fit for a slave. Then we have negative commandment 258, which we may not sell him as would a non-Jewish slave. So in those times, the way they would sell a slave is they would have this bench or whatever, some stone that they would, have the slave standing there, and they would sell a slave. This is prohibited. It's prohibited to sell a slave as was accepted in those times. And actually, as we've said in the past, that it is prohibited to kidnap. And more than that, more than the kidnapping part, is selling a slave is really prohibited. And the punishment is quite severe when it comes to that. So one is prohibited from selling a slave. Negative commandment 259, may not give him work that is not needed. So for example, having him heat up a cup of water if you actually don't need to drink it, or having him work in the field and say, just keep doing this until I tell you when to stop. This type of work is humiliating. It's not fitting for the way to treat a slave. And in general, a slave should be treated the way any servant would be treated, any other employee. Be sure that you treat a slave in this way. Now, I do want to clarify that, of course, this does not apply today. This only applies in the days when we observe the Jubilee, which we've discussed in the past, and there's a whole bunch of laws surrounding the Jubilee and how that worked, but which of course we do not have today, so this does not really apply today. Negative commandment 257, can't force him to carry your clothing to bathhouse. And as we said, only would a regular employee, this is actually, we're just going back here, we've already said this, that, a slave already feels like he's in a lower position. Don't make him feel like he's even lower, degrading him. Make sure he feels dignified and like a mensch. Finally, we have negative commandments 259 and 260, which we did say about the useless work, but one more adding here, what we did not say is that if a Jew decides to sell himself to a non-Jew, and as we said, this really is prohibited to sell yourself as a slave, and especially to a non-Jew. We shouldn't say, oh, well, he got himself into this position and it's on him. Let him take care of it. If we see that he's being mistreated, if we see that he's, having difficulty, do not close your eyes. Don't ignore it. And you should help him, even though this is something that he shouldn't do. So, of course, how much more so if we have a friend, if we know somebody that gets themselves into any position that is a difficult one, be there for each other, even if it was somebody that you think deserves what they're getting. It is important for us to treat each other with respect. Have a wonderful day.